Hello, I'm Mantastic and Fantastic, and today I'm going to be discussing the new content that came out on December 7th. Yes, this is one day later, but this was quite a bit of content to write and go through, so hopefully stay through all the new evolutions and buffs to find out where they fit into the current meta. So, new evolutions are perhaps one of the most exciting aspects of Puzzling Dragons because they basically breathe new life into older cards. They regain viability, they have new uses. It's also fun to try and accomplish because these new reincarnated evolutions are actually quite challenging to make. Not necessarily the materials, but the 16 million experience curve. So it's another project to work on, so it gives you something else to do. Like, it is exciting, and I feel like a lot of the reincarnated artwork is actually quite miraculous. So the Greco-Romans, at least the first three, actually received brand new evolutions, and all the three Greco-Romans of Minerva, Neptune, and Ceres all have bind immunity, and they all reduce damage to three different colors, so light, dark, plus their primary attribute. And dual leaders have 75% damage reduction. So you can, with the right subs and latents, achieve 100% resistance. Now, a lot of people are using like a cheese style team in which they use corresponding puppeteer to transform the boss into their resisted color. And then that means you are able to have 100% damage reduction against them, so you can't physically die. Furthermore, because the leaders are bind immune, you can inherit a bind clear binds, and you just never lose. So it's a cheesy way to clear content. It's going to be time consuming, but it is doable. So first off is I'm going to be discussing about all the leaders outside of a cheese scenario because that applies to all three. So for Reincarnated Minerva, she actually has been revamped quite significantly. She gains up to a 6 times attack multiplier and 50% damage reduction to fire, light, and dark. So dual Minervas basically have 4 times health and recovery against those three elements, as well as 36 times attack. However, many players are now pairing Reincarnated Minerva with the new Ilm evolution, which I'll talk later on in this video. And this actually causes you to form a 60 times attack team along with 2.5 times recovery, while still having 50% damage reduction to fire, light, and dark. So this is a much better trade-off because instead of going 100 times glass cannon with Ilm, you actually have a good amount of defensive viability against 3 dangerous colors, and you have a modest amount of recovery, plus you have high damage. Like 60 times is nothing to snuff at, considering you can stack rows. So this team is actually very stable, it's very safe, it can clear plenty of content, and it gives you an option because say you have Ilm, you can pair with Minerva. If you have Minerva, you pair with Ilm, so on and so forth. So it's a bit easier to, I guess, find this team because it's 2 leaders technically, even though one is a 6-star Godfist exclusive. So when you're team building a Reincarnated Minerva Ilm team, in theory, it might be slightly more beneficial to go for fire, just because Minerva's base active is a fire orb changer. However, going for a light-based team is probably just equally effective, and it just comes down to personal preference and what subs you have available. Also, if it's a water-heavy dungeon, naturally light will do more favorably in there. So you want to start trying to plan these inherits because Reincarnated Minerva is bind immune, so that may be where you want to inherit a bind clearing active because Ilm still can be bound. And if Ilm is bound, you lose that recovery bonus, and that can be problematic, especially if you're facing non-fire, light, dark bosses. So one final thought to keep with Reincarnated Minerva is that because she regains her god typing, you actually can use her as a budget raw dragon sub, because she has a cooldown, like a base cooldown of 5 turns, and that means you can inherit something over top of her. Plus, with her 1000 weighted stats, she becomes quite formidable on the new Raw Dragon teams. So a lot of these reincarnated gods, if they have short base cooldowns and nice awakenings, are used on Raw Dragon teams. And also, because Minerva's bind immune, it helps preserve the bind immunity across the whole team. Next is Reincarnated Neptune, and of course he has still the same cheese applications. However, as a leader, he's much more lackluster compared to Minerva, as well as a sub, because his active skill is relatively weak. It also has a very long cooldown, so it makes it challenging to inherit something over top of it. Furthermore, there's no Ilm equivalent, so you can't have that nice high damage team, so it's just a little awkward if you are Reincarnated Neptune. Like, it's just, outside of cheesing, I don't think it's going to see much gameplay. And finally, we come to Reincarnated Series, and Series may not be necessarily used as a leader. Similar reasons as Neptune, no Ilm equivalent pairing, and 36 times is nice, but you may have stronger options out there. However, with that 1000 weighted stats and her bind clearing active, you are able to use her as a sub on either Mono Wood or Rainbow teams, most notably the Raw Dragon team. Yes, her cooldown is slightly longer than Minerva's, however, you cover different colors and you still have that whole bind immunity aspect, so you can keep your team bind immune. Just simply inherit something over top of her and you're good to go. Next released was the Reincarnated Indian 1 gods, or at least 3 of them. So these reincarnated evolutions are quite exciting because a lot of them, like Shiva, Lakshmi, and Parvati, were all pretty powerful leaders. Like, they were exciting leaders, and the reincarnated forms propelled them significantly further ahead. So first off is Reincarnated Shiva, and Reincarnated Shiva now is able to form a 49 times attack, 4 times recovery, 2-prong attack oriented team. Now, this is actually quite respectable because Shiva has 2 prongs and the second highest weighted attack stat in the game, I think. I could be wrong, but it's one of the highest, definitely. So you are able to deal spectacular burst damage. However, you are still overshadowed by Krishna just because Krishna has that health multiplier. And also because Krishna technically has higher burst damage capacity because you can flood the board more easily with Rose compared to 2 prongs. However, Shiva has a much stronger base recovery. It's 4 times the 2.25, so basically 1 heal orb will basically instantly heal you to full health, which means you can run a health badge in solo mode. Co-op helps alleviate that health deficit, along with basically being able to activate your leader skill more often. So comparatively speaking, Shiva's 49, Krishna is 45 times attack. However, Krishna requires 9 fire orbs to achieve that level of prowess. And it's really hard to hoard 9 fire orbs. Like, it is challenging. Like, you have to match other things and pray the fire orbs don't match. Like, you're making less combos, so you're tanking hits, and your dungeon clears are going to be very slow. You have to stall quite often with Krishna. Otherwise, you have to use actives, and then you blow things up. Conversely, Reincarnated Shiva does not need to use actives to kill things. You can match a 2-prong of fire, which you should have on a given board, and then a total of at least 7 combos, so fire plus 6. And with the damage tests I've been doing on like my mom's account, who has a much better Shiva team than me, her Shiva's hitting about 2 million damage with just 1 fire 2-prong and 6 total combos. So if you have heavy 2-prong subs like, say, Hino Kagetsugu, Set, even Red, Green, Sao Sao, so on and so forth, you're hitting more than enough damage to clear most content in the game. Like, I was doing some Ultimate Devil Rush with Reincarnated Shiva, one-shotting Grizzar no problem, like, just blowing through content. Like, that's a lot of health, 28 million. So Reincarnated Shiva still has crazy amounts of damage, and it's a lot easier to use than Krishna because you're not active reliant, you don't have to stall, and if you get hit, you can always heal to full health. So Krishna is only stronger than Shiva just because you have that health multiplier. If it wasn't for that health multiplier, Reincarnated Shiva would be the better choice, hands down, in the sense that it's faster and easier to use. And for most content, you don't actually need to deal an outrageous amount of damage. Like I said, 2 million per Shiva, and maybe 2 subs to 2 million. You've hit 8 million already with 4 cards. You have 2 more to go. You're probably killing most content with 8 million damage, and you don't have to rely on using actives. Furthermore, if you do use an active, you're obviously going up higher and higher in damage. So only, like, say, Annihilation tier content where you might need to have, like, say, 50 million damage, Krishna might start shining a little brighter, possibly. But even then, Shiva does have the potential to keep up just because you have a lot of nice fire 2-prong subs. Especially when, say, Reincarnated Hino comes out, that's going to be even a greater damage asset for Shiva. So, like, overall, like, Krishna is a stronger choice because you're tankier, but Shiva has a lot of pros going for him. He's faster, easier to use, less active reliant, less stalling required. So it all depends on what the dungeon is playing. Like, I would only bring out Krishna if I need to play really hard content and I was forced to stall and I couldn't rely on Shiva's lower health. If the dungeon doesn't require you to have high health, like there's no preemptives, I would probably run Shiva in most cases because you're just going to burn through the dungeon very fast. Like, you don't have to worry about using actives, you don't have to worry about stalling. Even if you did use actives, you just burn through it fast. So I almost think Shiva is actually very powerful. Like, it should be seeing a lot of gameplay. It's going to be very popular with the vast majority of the pad population. Like, you can easily clear Arena 1, 2, and obviously 3 is going to be tough because of the health, but maybe it is doable. Who knows? Like, maybe I'll see if I can. I don't know. But like I said, in co-op, you're probably going to have 40 to 45,000 plus health, so you're well positioned for Reincarnated Shiva to do well. Next is Reincarnated Lakshmi, and she's actually the newest 100 times leader to arrive in Puzzle and Dragons. So she is reliant on matching connected hard orbs to trigger damage. So it's kind of a strange leader skill. You actually have 100 times attack, 4 times recovery. So you need to have hard orbs to deal damage, and you always heal to full health when you match. So it's kind of interesting. So it can make stalling problematic because you don't have a health multiplier, because in order to stall, you have to match hard orbs. But your hard orbs are what you need to deal damage, so it's kind of like counterintuitive. You'll always heal to full health, but you don't have enough hard orbs to deal damage. So your 100 times attack leader skill is triggered from 8 connected hard orbs, and 8 is kind of awkward, and you generally want to make a water row in conjunction with your hard orb match. So right away, that's 14 orbs, and that means you're very orb hungry, so it can be challenging to save enough orbs, and you might be using actives quite liberally. Thankfully, Reincarnated Lakshmi gained a skill boost awakening, so you are able to have more actives ready by turn 1, in solo mode especially. So it depends on what the dungeon, depends if you can stall. Like, you're basically playing a tank team without a health multiplier. At least, thankfully, water tends to have very tanky cards as a general rule, and you can easily break 30,000 health in solo mode. So with the badge, you're going to be hitting, like, say, 33 plus 1,000 health, no problem, maybe more. So you are durable, and provided you can survive any regular hit, you can always heal to full health. Just the downside of Reincarnated Lakshmi is she is like kind of an awkward tank team, and it's a bit riskier than some other tank teams. You do plenty of damage, but you're not a good glass cannon leader because you're so orb hungry. If you wanted a glass cannon leader, you should play Sarasvati, who's also 100 times, but requires 9 instead of 14 orbs for optimal damage. Like, I guess Lakshmi could do 8 hard orbs plus 3 water, but that's not going to do very much damage, unfortunately. So Lakshmi is very orb hungry, and that's the main problem. Like, it might be possibly more efficient to match, say, 6 connected hearts, like a row of hearts, than a row of water. You still have 56.25 times, you do have rows, so that might be a more efficient way to try and use less orbs, and 56 times should kill most content. So all in all, like, Lakshmi is strong. She's still vulnerable to binds, and her active is kind of weak. Like, generating just hard orbs is not that helpful. It doesn't do that much else, so you're usually inheriting something over her anyway. So she is a fun leader. She's just not going to be seeing too much gameplay just because it's awkward, and with heart crossing being a thing, it's just an easier gameplay by comparison. Next is Reincarnated Parvati, and it kind of rhymes with Harvardi, and I kind of want some cheese now. But regardless, Reincarnated Parvati is basically the wood equivalent to Lakshmi in terms of the leader skill. You are able to achieve 100 times damage if you connect 8 hard orbs. Naturally, matching less hard orbs means you do less damage, but it may have easier for spacing. However, she is a 2-prong oriented leader with a great subpool to draw from because wood has plenty of 2-prong cards. Furthermore, Parvati's active is a lot stronger. It's a shorter cooldown, if I'm not mistaken. You generate hard orbs from a specific type of orbs, and you also enhance hearts and wood. So you are able to basically have a hard orb generation and damage enhance all at the same time. So that is great because it allows you to save a sub slot. Furthermore, Parvati actually gains this Recover Bind Awakening. So that means if you match a row of hearts, which you probably are anyways, you unbind your whole team. And this goes in conjunction with her Bind Immunity. So she's actually one of the strongest bind clearing options for mono wood teams. However, when you're using Parvati as a leader, you still don't have any skill bind resists. So you probably will have to run someone like Freyr or Perseus to achieve 100% bind immunity. Otherwise, your skills will be locked, you'll be sad, and you might die. So outside of like that kind of glass cannon leadership role, Reincarnated Parvati does, like I said, become one of the best options for bind clearing. Like, you can put her on your mono wood teams, you can clear binds with ease, you have double 2-prong awakening, so you are offensive at the same time. So she is pretty great in my opinion. However, you can use her on various rainbow teams, most notably with her god typing and bind immunity, you want to use her on the new raw dragon teams. Because the 2 prongs you have, you can match a wood TPA, get 144 times damage, you're going to kill a lot of stuff. So she's one of the better options available. Yes, her active skill does not help your team, however, you are probably just going to inherit over it, or you can even use it as an emergency hard orb generator and heal yourself to full health with the enhanced hearts. So overall, she's fantastic. Like, she has great flexibility as a leader or as a sub now, and she's probably one of the more desirable options for those types of teams. Next is a surprise farmable evolution from Ishtar, and Ishtar basically is a boss you can acquire from one of the technical dungeons, and she's one of the nicer options now available for Awoken Liu Bei teams, because she is a farmable dragon killer that is not Machine Athena. Furthermore, Ishtar has only 35 team cost, so when Rogue descends, she will actually level up, and she'll actually be able to have damage, unlike Machine Athena, who will remain very, very low level, have pitiful attack because Machine Athena has a late bloomer experience curve, Ishtar's normal, so you'll gain stats at a more consistent rate. So she's great in that regard. She's a much easier to acquire Dragon Killer sub for Awoken Liu Bei teams. Furthermore, her active skill actually voids defense for 1 turn, so it's actually a farmable replacement for Balboa. So now you don't even need to have Balboa, you can have Ishtar instead. So like, she's great all around. Like, this is pretty fantastic. Like, you can easily put her on Rogue Descend, use her on Rogue Descends because she levels up quick. You can break the pre-draws defense. She has Dragon Killer if you're playing various Dungeons with Dragons. So she's just fantastic all around. Next is the split evolutions for the Godfest exclusives, and it gives them new viability, and it allows these 2 Godfest exclusives to have more well-defined uses. Because beforehand, Canna did not really have a home. She was kind of an awkward card. And presently speaking, Light Canna gets a 4th 2-prong and Bind Immunity, and she becomes one of the core subs on the future Raw Dragon teams, because you want 2 Dark Callies, Ices, and Light Canna. Because Light Canna is Bind Immune, so your team is fully Bind Immune. You have 4 2-prongs, so a light TPA will crush content of 144 times. And you would usually inherit a Gemstone Princess on top of her active, just because it's relatively lackluster by comparison. But hey, like, you have the perfect sub for Raw Dragon with Light Canna. Outside of this, you're probably not using Light Canna very much, which gives uses to her Dark Light form. So her Dark Light form obviously forms a strong sub on Dark teams. However, she is not Bind Immune, but she gains a modest leadership potential. She has 2.25 times health and 27.56 times attack for dragons and god types. So this outclasses older tank teams like Lucifer, for instance. However, you may feel a bit lackluster compared to teams like, say, Krishna, just because Krishna is a better tank team, higher damage multiplier. However, Dark Light Canna can pair with the new Yomi Dragon. You do sacrifice quite a bit of an attack multiplier. However, you gain a bit more health, a bit more stability, and better damage control. So it is an option. Some people might be doing that. It's kind of like a budget Yomi Dragon alternative, so something to keep in mind. And finally, we come to Ilm, and Ilm, like Canna, has a more leadership-defined and more sub-defined role. So the leader Ilm actually has the fire subcolor, and you are actually capable of forming 100 times attack, 6.25 times recovery team when matching light and fire orbs. However, like I mentioned before, you want to pair with Reincarnated Minerva to form the 60 times attack, 2.5 times recovery team with 50% damage reduction to fire, light, and dark bosses. So this team is very safe, very stable, great damage output, great survivability, just very strong all around. On the other hand, the sub-Ilm basically loses that subtyping. They gain a lot more weighted stats, and they gain stronger awakenings, most notably 3 rows and 2 2-prongs. So the sub-Ilm can be used on various mono light teams, most notably the newly buffed Xiu Min or Tifa teams, or really the Xiu Min Tifa team combination. So leader skill changes. So Tsubaki has, oh shoot, I pressed refresh by accident. Whoops. Tsubaki basically gained 500 more health and a physical typing, which is nice, like why not, it's a buff. However, the biggest improvement comes with a recovery multiplier. So dual Tsubakis now form a 2.25 times recovery team. So now healing is no longer an issue, so you can take the health badge in solo mode and greatly benefit from the system. So that is kind of fun, it's pretty exciting. And basically it allows your team that's normally fragile to have at least some form of healing, and you can opt for the plus 15% health badge, like I said. So stronger team, we're just kind of waiting for the split evolution of Tsubaki at this point now. Next is Awoken Hino, and Awoken Hino is now able to deal 3 times attack when matching fire and dark orbs, along with that special attack after matching orbs. So that special attack after matching orbs is a way to actually kill resolve bosses. Furthermore, with at least a 3 times multiplier, you can pair with the Reincarnated Shiva, so 3 times 7 is 21 times attack. With 21 times attack, you can clear a modest amount of content and easily kill the resolve bosses because they will get hit by the special attack afterwards and never trigger their resolve mechanic like the resurrection, skill delay, or execution. Awoken Anubis gained 2.5 times attack after using a skill instead of 2 times. He just hits even harder. It's kind of almost like a transitional stage towards his reincarnated form. Doesn't apply to most people. He already does crazy amounts of damage anyways. Next is Xiumin, and Xiumin gained actually a very sizable buff because you now actually deal 2.5 times for 2 light combos along with 7 times attack for numerous linked light orbs. So basically by himself he becomes a 17.5 times attack leader, and this is actually even more appealing because you want to pair with Tifa because this will solve his recovery issues as well as gaining a 7x5 board. Xiumin plus Tifa results in an 87.5 times attack team with 5 times recovery, and you have rows. Lots of rows. So you can deal an outrageous amount of burst damage and always heal to full health. That is huge. Like, it gives Xiumin a lot more value because before he was kind of awkward because you hit hard but you couldn't heal, you couldn't stall, and you just floundered because your damage actually was a little harder to ramp up. Now with Tifa, you have a great pairing, and this is some artwork drawn by Pancake. I think it's cute. It's kind of fitting for this. Next is Xinhua. She basically gained a similar buff to Xiumin, except there's no Tifa pairing and the damage is a bit lower, so she's just a little awkward to use still. Like, you have much better options, and she's mostly used as a sub on, say, Gremory teams. Next is the Red Wisdom King God, who I'll never pronounce properly. They basically now are able to achieve 2.25 times health, 196 times attack, and 49 times recovery. That has to hit 9 combos, and you cannot use Skyfalls. It's cool, it's just awkward. Next is Kundali, and Kundali can now achieve 100 times attack when forming 4 water combos, but you cannot benefit from Skyfalls. You have a small amount of damage mitigation, however, you're basically outclassed by Sarasvati in most cases because she hits 100 times with 9 instead of 12 orbs, she can stack rows for higher burst damage, and she can use Skyfalls. So Kundali's more so a better sub or a skill inheritance transfer. Akala finally received her highly desired buff after like a week or 2 of release, and Akala now can match fire crosses along with wood crosses to deal large damage. So on a regular 6x5 board, you actually are able to hit 2,460 times attack with 3 color crosses, so 2 wood fire or 2 fire 1 wood. Kind of outrageous. However, the inclusion of fire greatly reduces the chance of orb trolling because you now can have 5 fire, 5 wood, and 182 times damage. So that will clear most content, and it will greatly alleviate the stress of bringing orb changers or stalling because now you can blow through content a little easier just because you have the option of fire crosses or wood crosses. So just make sure you don't bring orb changers like the preset team where they took away fire orbs all the time. Next are the active skill changes, and this basically provides new viability for some subs, or some cards as subs or even leaders. So Awoken Hades now provides 5 turns of plus 5 seconds to orb movement time instead of 1. This occurs alongside of his 25% gravity, and it's a little overkill having 5 additional seconds for 5 turns, but it's a buff. We'll take it, why not? Awoken Yomi gains the same, similar train of thought as Awoken Hades. However, he or she only buffs 3 turns for 5 seconds instead of 5. It doesn't make sense because Yomi was the original Change the World. I thought they're the time-oriented leader, but apparently not. Next is Light Zhu Liang, and he is able to heal more, 20 times of their recovery, so quite a large amount of healing actually. And they actually provide 2 turns of Bind and Awakening Bind clear. It's another option if you don't own Greed Owned. However, 2 turns of Awakening Bind clear is not sufficient when facing Lynthia, so Light Zhu Liang is still not that great, unfortunately. The Armor Knight series provide 2.5 times damage for a specific type of monster, and this now lasts for 2 turns. So this makes them a very strong choice if you're using teams that run a certain typing, so all Devil, all God teams, so on and so forth, will like the Armor Knights more because now it's a stronger alternative to the Norse gods. However, they are still outclassed by the Gemstone Princesses because they provide the most damage enhancement, and they also now provide it for 2 turns. So if you want to calculate how much damage enhance you have, you follow the formula of 1 plus brackets 0.3 times n, where n is the number of awakenings. If you are Silk, it's 0.15 times n. So I just basically include this handy little chart here so you can take a look at what awakenings they do and what their multiplier is. So the Gemstone Princesses are now the best damage enhancement option, hands down. Famiel and Lumiel have gained 100,000 true damage to all enemies instead of a single one. So now they're able to execute all the pre-draws and rogue descends in Arena, as well as being another option for button teams. However, on button teams, they're a little less ideal than Awoken Ra because they have one longer turn cooldown and they have one less skill boost. So it takes effectively 2 more turns to charge up. Next is Napoleon, and he produces 5 instead of 3 fire orbs alongside of his 35% damage mitigation. So the damage mitigation is quite helpful, and being able to generate 5 instead of 3 is a pretty large buff. And his best home is on Tsubaki teams because they can greatly benefit from the orb enhances. However, one thing you have to keep in mind is that you still run the risk of overriding your light orbs, but thankfully with a Tsubaki team you have so much haste, you can have great uptime on the shield, and you can simply use Tsubaki after Napoleon if you lose out too many light orbs. So pretty awesome all around, and the shield actually helps mitigate the health problems on Tsubaki teams, especially when you have such high recovery from the leader skill buff I mentioned before. Barbarossa now produces 6 water orbs and along with his single turn of delay. So more water orbs, another option for water cards to use as a delay. Granted, it's only a single turn. However, if you're facing resolve bosses or basically resolve bosses or bosses with problematic mechanics, 1 turn is usually enough to bypass all their dangerous abilities. So it's another great option either as an inherit or as a sub. Robin Hood is able to generate 6 instead of 3 wood orbs at random, and they also have 1 less turn on their cooldown. So they're able to charge up a little faster, and the 1.5 times attack to wood types for 3 turns is useful. Yang Guofei has their active skill reduced from 9 to 7 turns, along with giving them more viability on push button teams. However, being able to change orbs to fire, water, wood, and light is kind of lackluster until Awoken Sakuya regains some viability. And last but not least is No Banaga, and No Banana has basically his bind clearing capabilities improved. He now clears 3 instead of 2 turns, and this is quite a significant boost because now he makes a much more viable bind clearing option on your dark teams because you now can generate dark orbs and clear binds, so as a sub or inherit he's much stronger. So in conclusion, lots of buffs took place, lots of new evolutions, lots of exciting things, lots of fun things to play in Puzzle & Dragons. So let me know what you found most exciting, and if you want to read this article, you can check it out in the description below. So have a mantastic day, and happy puzzling!